So hello, Tom. It's good to speak with you again. We're continuing with our interview series. This is the second part of a total of 3 parts on the topic of logistics and supply chain talent challenges. Can you start by giving a brief background of yourself?
Yes, I'm Tom Tanel, President, CEO of CATTAN Services Group. We're a logistics and supply chain management advisory, counseling, and training firm. I want to thank you for having me back to discuss part 2 of the Logistics Supply Chain Talent Challenge. And as we discussed in this part, we're going to try to focus, I hope, on the talent gap shortfall and skill sets needed.
Great. Well, my first question is, as an experienced workforce retires, how do we replace this depletion of experienced baby boomers?
According to Supply Chain Insights, 60% of the companies in the supply chain industry right now have job openings. 51% of them are seeing an increase in the turnover of their supply chain leaders. This is now. In the long run, you don't replace this depletion of experienced baby boomers. Looking ahead, the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics predicts the number of logistics jobs are expected to grow by 22% by 2022, nearly double the rate of other professions. Therefore, we're going to be in the catch-up mode for at least a decade or more. Recently came across a white paper entitled, "Are You Prepared for the Supply Chain Talent Crisis?" by MIT Center for Transportation Logistics, which actually is in agreement with other recent surveys. As it states, the supply chain faces a severe shortage of talent at a time when the demand on the profession have never been greater. Furthermore, in the report it says the net result is a talent tsunami. That caught my attention. In some instances, I think the shortage of talent has simply occurred because companies have inadequate human resource management to support the recruitment and retention of supply chain talent. In the 2008 to 2012 recession, a lot of related layoffs have probably undermined the industry's ability to build back the profession's not only frontline workers, but management talent. Is there some good news? Yes. There's a vast pool of talent out there in the form of the many talented supply chain professionals who chose to leave the profession altogether during that time, or people who, for one reason or another, have been away from the labor market for a long time. And as I will address in part 3 of the series, we can also replenish the logistics and supply chain workforce with returning military veterans and separated logistics-oriented veterans who will be reentering the workplace as a result of our turn down in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places.
So what key supply chain competencies or skill sets are needed to overcome this talent gap shortfall?
As a result of what we just discussed and this question here, I think the immediate question is where we find people with both the breadth and the depth of supply chain skills for operating in a global environment with cost-to-serve trade-offs to influence optimal supply chain design decisions. That's a tall order to fill concerning the talent gap shortfall. APQC recently conducted a survey whose results indicate there are skills gaps among the recent supply chain job candidates. These gaps primarily occur with more strategic skills. Well, as a result, recruiting and retaining supply chain talent is more of a talent shortage problem today for the strategic positions. Andrea Jung, former Avon CEO, emphatically states talent is the #1 priority for a CEO. She says you think it's about vision and strategy, but you have to get the right people first. Well, that means hiring the right person, one who can do the job but wants the opportunity. How do you do that? By answering the question, do you have the right people with the right skills when and where you need them? What many executives don't realize is that supply chain management is an activity that touches so many other parts of a company's business. For young people, frontline workers in management, it may appear complex and mystifying. But as a profession, we have the important task of explaining to the next generation exactly what is involved. However, setting out what the job entails is difficult for most HR types. For that reason, we need to be clear to these millennials that what we are looking for in terms of skills. The ability to communicate well, solve problems, use IT effectively, demonstrate leadership, show organizational skills, and apply a creative global mindset. One of the key supply chain competencies we need to overcome this talent gap shortfall is the capacity to solve supply chain problems that you encounter day to day, namely critical thinking. This includes a skill set aimed at problem solving and decision making. We're talking the innate ability to identify the problem, access and organize relevant information, discern causes and effects, generate options, and choose and implement a workable solution. As a consequence, the supply chain job is no longer mostly a functional transaction and tactical-based one. It is a strategic role that can influence up to 60 to 70% of a company's total cost, all of its inventories, and most aspects of customer service. In most firms, the supply chain controls most of the inventory, manages 60 to 70% of the cost, and helps generate revenue, providing outstanding product availability while managing many of the firm's physical assets. The Great Recession of 2008-2010 will increase the focus on the supply chain's impact on the financial health of a firm. So stated Dr. Dittman, Executive Director of the Global Supply Chain Institute at the University of Tennessee. Therefore, the first talent gap shortfall is budgetary cost control. Additionally, supply chain management requires resource allocation to include facilities, material handling, storage and transport equipment, technology enablers and software, and both human and energy resources. So the supply chain job today is no longer a logistics functional one. It is a key strategic role that can influence 60 to 70% of a company's total budgeted cost. And I've said that now 3 times for emphasis. All of its inventory and most aspects of customer service. The second biggest talent gap shortfall is in the realm of analytics, according to Art Vandenberg of Discovery Executive Service. He says, those skills are insufficient without context and experience. Our colleges and universities seem to address the mathematical, statistical, and quantitative methods of preparing graduates for supply chain analytics. Whereas Van Bodegraven articulates as an example a mathematical analysis to lead us on one direction, but experience will point us in another.
So how do we address this talent gap shortfall while the number of supply chain university programs is increasing and the scope and the depth of the curriculum and the number of formally trained or degreed workers is lagging behind the current needs?
Interestingly, Career Builder identified logistician supply chain manager as a top growth job and has experienced an 8% job growth since 2010. According to them, there's only one active candidate for every 5 jobs posted. And as college universities introduce undergraduate majors, MBA concentrations, degree programs, the shortage of supply chain talent is generally attributed to a skills gap. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that colleges and universities have recognized this as an opportunity. It's amazing the number of degree programs that you can find online on the internet. Grads who receive a degree in supply chain management is looked upon as being the hot new MBA. It's Specifically, research has shown that graduates with undergraduate and graduate degrees in supply chain management are not adequately prepared for supply chain jobs, and that professionals in the supply chain do not have the skill set necessary to take on management roles. A broad knowledge and skill set across the supply chain is really lacking in universities, as noted by MIT's Center for Transportation Logistics white paper that I cited earlier. And then the APQC results of their survey indicate candidates are best prepared for the more basic aspects of supply chain, procurement and inventory. They also highlight in their survey the gap in skills among potential employees, given that candidates are rated most prepared for tactical aspects of the supply chain field. In today's complex, far-flung supply chains, most decisions have multiple consequences, many of them intended, states Dr. Mahmoudi, who's the director of the Global Supply Chain Management Program at Clarkson University. Meanwhile, as research indicates, organizations are addressing the need to further develop their supply chain hires in a number of ways. Some have adopted training programs to improve the skills of high potential employees once they've been brought on board. Such programs include on-the-job training of the organization's logistics processes and/or rotation programs to give employees more experience in different aspects of the supply chain. And corporate universities are already carving out some new roles to address the talent shortage. As a training center, the Corporate Supply Chain University's goal is to achieve logistics operational excellence and drive alignment around key logistics processes and standards. And lastly, an aging workforce means waves of retirees will soon be leaving across the board. As a result, we risk losing critical institutional knowledge if we're not prepared. The baby boomers need to be able to tutor and coach your newly hired millennials through a mentoring program. Personally, as a baby boomer with 40 years of experience, I can attest that it is difficult to gain experience without also gaining knowledge. Knowledge comes by taking things apart, analysis, but wisdom comes by putting things together. Believe John Morrison, former president of Anderson College. It is this wisdom, which baby boomers have already accumulated, that is really lacking at colleges and universities.
And thank you, Tom. And I look forward to speaking with you next time for part 3, where you're going to discuss seizing the opportunity to replenish logistics and supply chain, the workforce with military veterans.
And I'll be happy to be talking about that. Thank you.
Thank you.